Hello, friends. This is a little transition episode that I've been doing when I'm kind of in between series. And as usual, get the fast forward button ready for my ums and ahs, my slow speaking. But I've enjoyed this last series of Architects of Enough. And I'm just taking a break. I'm going to read some classic literature pieces as I fulfill my Kickstarter. And I want to thank everyone who sent good vibes for my first Kickstarter campaign for the new book, Peace Stuff Enough, and for the people that backed the campaign. I'm just really, really grateful. Thank you so much. And there's one old book collection set, and on the inside covers my grandmother wrote Mrs. Catherine Sarton, 1951. But it's just a little collection of classic literature, and I'm just going to read some random things. I've decided to read them as Kitty O Compost because I have a new series that'll be coming out around the first of the year called Control AI Disarm, and it's going to be about the Great Disarmament and peace commons with just how are we going to handle some of this AI stuff, the physical material created by AI. And it's a satirical series. And I just personally wanted to kind of work on my skill at her voice. And so I've decided to read this literature, and you'll find out if I read one or two and it's a complete bomb, but I really enjoy the character, and I think I'll be better at this character and doing the satirical series when I do it by practicing it. I love reading. It's like, why am I reading these random things? And something happened this week that I'm really hesitant to even talk about, but I wrote it down carefully in my journal to record it. And basically what it was I started reading the I Ching, which is spelled I Ching, but I learned recently in reading the book that is pronounced I Ching. And I got this little book in Yak, Montana, at a little music festival. A woman had a bookstore in a little trailer. It was very cool. And I didn't really know why I was buying it, except I knew I maybe had heard of it at some point in my life, but I knew it was special. I knew it was spiritual. And it's just been on my shelf or moving in a box from here to there for probably the past 5 or 6 years. And I'm taking this Qigong class. And so my eyes rested on it in my library. I pulled it out. I set it kind of near where I do meditation. And when I meditate in the morning, I usually read something it's been almost the full year. I've been through this book before, but I'll read the Hafiz One Poem a Day book, and I'll meditate. I'll do yoga to music, but sometimes I'll do yoga to a podcast of a spiritual teacher. But I was listening to an episode of Be Here Now and Ram Dass, and he said something. I'm looking in my notes here so I can say it correctly. And I want to let you know the episode number too, but if I don't find it here, I'll just put it in the show notes. I feel like it was 239 of the Be Here Now Ram Dass podcast. And so I heard this phrase, and the phrase was, "He who knows does not speak, and he who speaks does not know." And Ram Dass went on to talk about, how here he was as a teacher, and I guess Lao Tzu said that phrase, and even his guru told him not to go home and talk about all the things he learned, but he did it anyway. But this kind of predicament of being, well, just I'll let that line rest as it is. And I will often, if I want to write something down, I'll pause it and then I'll rewind and I'll write it down. So I paused that, and then I picked up the I Ching book to read a bit, and I've just been reading a few paragraphs at a time. And this book was written in the early 60s by John Blofield. He's was living in China, decided to write this book, and of course, do I have it here in front of me? Um, it is, the full title is The Book of Change, a new translation of the ancient Chinese text with detailed instructions for its practical use in divination by John Blofeld. And so I've just been reading a couple paragraphs at a time. And so I stopped to read some, and I got to this point where he repeats the exact line of "He who knows does not speak, and he who speaks does not know." And he was talking about it as it relates to really anyone speaking about what God is. And it's a beautiful paragraph that he wrote that maybe at some other point I'll go and read. But so I had just heard that from Ram Dass, and then here I am. I'm reading the I Ching, and here's the serendipity of rewinding so I could write that line in my journal, stopping to read the book and finding the exact same line. So, I think whenever I read pieces of literature, I'm sure all of you or many of you have a similar experience that we as humans, we just make meaning from things and we feel like it's random. But I think these connections, we can call them randomness, but I think they're just the beauty of the universe, and that everything's connected and that we don't even fully understand all of these connections. So reading some literature from a bunch of dead white guys, and I haven't mentioned, but I'm going to mention it now, that it's going to be juxtaposed to me reading the current war zones and in this little series of reading, and I may continue it forever, I'm not sure. But in speaking of peace, I just want to make sure that I'm not in the doom of gloom of war, but that I am based in the reality and in this desire to be a scholar of peace, a warrior for peace, and a peace lover is just not a bunch of fluff. And our personal intention for disarmament and peace, it is real and it has power. So I'm not diminishing my own effect on that. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. But I also want to be practical. And I think reading the list of war zones personally for me is going to help ground me. And I plan to update it monthly. And so if you're listening to the podcast and you get to that part and it's a day that I don't have advertisements, other than when I talk about my own work, I don't have advertisements on my podcast. So the time that I take to read this is going to add, some minutes to the end. So there might be a day where you're like, I just can't listen to that today. But I'm hoping that there will be some days, and maybe many days, that you can just let those geographic areas wash over you. And when I read each one, I'm saying pieces here, and that you can be in prayer with me to acknowledge this reality of war, that the truth of peace is here now, that the truth of disarmament, if we can create these weapons and we can create these wars, that we can also create peace. So I think that's all. And so we'll start in the next episode. And I think that's about it. I was going to pray, in some of my episodes, I will pray. But I think what I said about the name of that section with the war zones is called The Next Peace Lands. So I will just end by saying, May we all create peace in our own life, simplify, see the beauty of nature and the moment and all the beauty around us. May we envision a world of peace.